Hello everyone, Stakuyi here.
And I'm Gabby.
And we are the hosts of History of Everything, a podcast which you can probably guess by the name is, well, it's about everything. Do you want to know why people thought potatoes were evil and would give you syphilis? Are you curious about all the stories of the terrible and stupid ways that people have kicked the bucket over the years? Do you want to hear tales about all of the different badasses of history and the lives that they had brought to life? Well, if so, then look no further. History of Everything is just the right podcast for you. It's available on Spotify, Pandora, and anywhere else that you get your podcast from. Join us for some fun and just see how weird and wacky history can be.
Hello, everyone. Gabby here.
And I'm Steven Stakuyi. Hi, I'm back.
And welcome back to the Mystery of Everything podcast. So we were just in Italy for 2.5 weeks, and we just got back literally last night, but we're leaving for the reckoning today, and Brenna has to get prepped, and we have to get prepped, so we didn't have time to record together.
It has been maddening, like absolutely maddening. We literally got back, woke up, and then just boom, okay, back to work we go.
Yeah, the travel back was terrible. It was just like every single flight was delayed. It was a mess. But anyway, we're here and we are getting into the story of another missing treasure. So I put out a poll on Patreon a few weeks ago and it was between Dutch shawls and Nazi gold and everyone voted both. So now we have 2 episodes on missing treasure.
Wait, was it like a 50-50 almost?
Yeah, everybody voted both.
Oh my God.
Like both was one of the options.
Both? Oh, that's what you mean. Both. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so you're probably wondering why I'm obsessed with missing treasure. Well, I need money, so you guys get it.
Do we not all? Gabby, if you found a Spanish galleon, would you report it?
Why would I? Is it illegal to not report it?
Sort of. Even to this very day, there are still fights between governments.
What if I took some stuff off of it and then I reported it?
See, they might check and look and see for bank statements and see if there's any deposits or other stuff. Like, there's ways to keep it hidden, but go.
I just tell them that this was inherited and been in my family for generations, so I decided to finally sell it. To pay off my student loans.
Okay, that makes sense. You know, there are still fights to this day between governments over the stuff because, Spain doesn't own the entirety of the New World. So every time a treasure is found, there's a fight between, does this treasure belong to Mexico or does it belong to Spain? Does this treasure belong to Peru or does it belong to, Chile and Spain?
And how do they settle it?
Usually a lot of legal court disputes and things. And I don't think any of them really get settled very much, or at least the feelings are still very bitter because they literally find hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold.
Wow. But anyway, with the cost of living today, I figured I'd just give some people some ideas on possible treasure that they can find, and then we can all just use it. It's more likely than winning the lottery at this rate. So we can cover all our bases, make sure we research every avenue.
Everyone go out into their backyard right now and dig a 5 by 5 foot hole. I guarantee we'll find something.
No, don't do that. That's bad advice. That is bad advice. But anyway, the thing about the missing Nazi gold is that it's one of those things that is true, but it's also entangled in a lot of legend. So what is it and how did it become the subject of many, many legends that span multiple continents? Well, during World War II, whenever the Nazis moved into an area and they captured it, in addition to all of the things that they destroyed and the people that they killed, they would also loot all of that area's treasured possessions. So these would include any priceless works of art, historical pieces from museums, jewels, religious objects of value, and, most importantly, gold.
Do you know why they did that? Like with art?
They needed money. Well, I know they wanted to make this super museum of all of the art be in Germany, but also they needed a lot of money.
Yeah, they did. There was a whole thing. Germany took out a lot of its own loans, and basically the way that they funded their military industry from the very beginning
was the stolen gold by robbing central banks. Yep.
Massive IOUs.
Yeah, we get into that later on. So they also looted all valuables of any of their victims as well. And that included their silverware, their porcelain, their glass, any oriental rugs, and just anything someone would have, like any individual would have or family would have that was worth pretty much anything. So in part, the Nazis, they really wanted the really priceless treasures to become part of their collections so that the greatest works of art in the world would become the property of Germany. But on the other hand, they used the less priceless objects, mainly gold, to really fuel their war machine. Because one of the articles that I read was basically, would Germany have been able to do what they did if they hadn't got access to all the central bank gold?
No, there's also, that's a great question. There's a great question because their finance, the whole financial system that the Nazis had in the first place was not great. Like, it was good for bringing Germany out of the Depression. Like, it was remarkably effective for what they initially did, but long-lasting war.
Rebuilding everything. Because remember, they had no military. They had to rebuild like their entire rearmament. It cost a bunch of money and they didn't have a lot of resources. That's their thing. Like, they wanted to be completely self-sufficient, but they didn't have everything they needed to be completely self-sufficient, especially when it comes to building a military. So they had to steal and pillage. Just back to the roots.
We're going back to ancient times here, folks.
So if you haven't caught on to it yet, the thing about Nazi gold is that it wasn't just gold. It was basically anything of value that was stolen. So we know that they did steal gold from the state banks of all of the countries that they occupied. And we also know that only 70% of those gold reserves ended up being returned. So why was Germany stealing all of this gold for their war machine? Well, in World War I, the Germans, they were pretty much starved out. They were blockaded by the British and nearly 500,000 Germans died of starvation. And due to this, they decided they never wanted to be dependent on other countries in order to sustain themselves. And someone might go back into like the irony of the electricity, but I won't.
Yeah, no, for things nowadays, yeah.
I won't. So they wanted 100% self-sufficiency without imports. In addition, they were forced to get rid of most of their military. So like all of the gear that they had to replenish, it was going to be very costly just to get that large of a military force once again. So the issue with rearmament and self-sufficiency, though, as I was saying earlier, is they didn't have the necessary materials for their war machine. They lacked high-grade steel that they needed for tanks. And although they did have low-grade iron ore, in order to utilize it, they needed to import tungsten or wolfram from countries like Spain or Portugal.
There was a lot of valuable things. This is one of the big things is why they needed Sweden. Sweden had like literally some of the best quality iron you could possibly have for war production. And this is one of the reasons why Sweden was spared, was so that they specifically would have a trade partner to get stuff. They just threatened them a lot by existing around them. That's why they invaded Norway.
Is it trade or extortion?
A little bit of both. Actually, basically, any kind of trade with Nazi Germany was kind of a little bit of both. It's one of the reasons why Switzerland never got invaded, because the Nazis still needed a legal avenue to be able to trade all their gold. So the Swiss got pretty rich during this time by trading gold with the Nazis.
Interesting. But in addition to not having the materials to build tanks or bombers, they also didn't have enough fuel for these tanks or their bombers. And even though they were attempting to make synthetic fuel, they still needed high-grade oil, which they also still had to import from places like Romania. They also had to import chromium from Turkey, and a lot of their ball bearings came from Sweden, actually.
Yes.
So basically, their war machine was running on a decent amount of imports, and that added up. So how were they paying for all of it? Interestingly enough, the countries that they were trading with were quote unquote neutral and wouldn't accept German currency as payment. So that's where all of this stolen gold came into play. In order to pay for their imports, they had to essentially rob the central banks of the countries they invaded, because that's where all of the gold that they really needed for trade was typically stored.
Honestly, that is smart, though, because, okay, remember how there was the whole thing with the American Civil War? But both sides printed money during this time in order to help pay for things, right? And the one that was really hurting was the South. The South printed ludicrous amounts of money in order to be able to fund their war machine, especially towards the middle to end of the war. And that stuff was basically useless. So there was a whole bunch of traders, like merchants, that dealt with the Confederacy. The smart ones only traded for like actual raw goods and also for gold. The ones who accepted Confederate IOUs, basically, for like their paper money, which pretty much was IOUs for anything, they ended up losing everything and going bankrupt, because after the war, the Confederacy lost. So those meant nothing. So it kind of makes sense that a bunch of nations would go, okay, hey, there's no guarantee from a war that you'll actually be able to pay any of the stuff, that your currency will ever matter. We want gold.
That's smart. Yeah. So essentially, the first country that fell victim to having their gold stolen by the Nazis was Austria. The Nazi officer in charge of funding Hitler's endeavors was known as Hjalmar Horace Greeley Schacht. And Schacht had close relations with the Austrian banks as he helped start the Bank for International Settlement. So he knew that the Austrian Central Bank had about 100 tons of gold, which was significantly more than the Germans had in their banks at that time. So when the Wehrmacht took Vienna, Wilhelm Kepler, a businessman and Hitler supporter, along with 2 armed Nazi units, they took the gold Austrian Central Bank, they took all of the gold in the Austrian Central Bank and they carted that gold back to Berlin. In addition, they were successful at forcing the Austrian bank to transfer 5.7 tons of gold that they had shipped to London for safekeeping. And they had to ship right back to them. I don't know how they pull that off. Like, if it was already gone, that probably took some convincing.
Well, remember, it's where a lot of the stuff is being stored. And this is prior to the war breaking out. And so technically speaking, at this point, the whole idea of appeasement is still going on. So the British banks aren't going to necessarily stop this because there's no memoranda to stop it. If this was 1939, then perhaps. But this is 1938 at this point. So they're trying to still avoid war.
And so, as we discussed before, they also took the valuables and gold that belonged to the Viennese Jewish community from all of the wealthy Jewish people in the area. And from these people, they got 14.3 tons of private gold that they then also transferred to Berlin. So the interesting thing about this is that without getting access to captured gold, Berlin would not have been able to necessarily carry out their rearmament. Due to this, one of the very first things the Nazis did when they took over a new country was immediately make a stop at the central bank. So due to the news of this spreading, the central banks of many countries started scrambling to get the gold out of their countries, with many banks sending their gold to Canada and the US. Even the Vatican sent nearly 8 tons of gold to New York. And in May of 1940, the Bank of England shipped 2,000 tons of gold across the U-boat-infested Atlantic. And this wasn't just Britain's gold. It also contained large stashes of gold that was being held for other countries as well. Luckily, every ship made it safely to the destination and not one ship was sunk.
That was crazy, especially considering that in 1940, when the war really broke out for things, the first 2 years of the war, U-boats were dominant. They were. Like, until the technology really began to develop, I believe it was in like mid-1943 that things really began to turn around and U-boats were being stopped more. Allied shipping was being wrecked during this time. That is genuinely a surprising figure.
I personally wouldn't put all of the gold on those ships. I don't know. That's nerve-wracking. I'd bury it somewhere and then not tell anyone where I buried it.
Oh, yeah, it's the British. Put it in Stonehenge. Make it actually valuable.
So it is said by many historians that without the stolen central bank gold, Hitler would have been an insignificant player in world history. So how do we know that there was, in fact, hidden loot spread around Europe? Well, in 1945, American troops found hidden loot across Germany and Austria. One of the largest discoveries was in the Merkers salt mine in Thuringia, Germany. So I found this really neat source from the National Archives that talks of the Merkers mine treasure. So let's just talk about that for a little bit. In April of 1945, Lieutenant Patton's army was advancing into Germany, and after securing the village of Merkers on April 4th, they started getting a lot of information from people in the area that the Nazis had actually moved German Reichsbank gold from Berlin to the Wintershall AG's Kaiserroda potassium mine in the area. So by April 6th, they were able to actually confirm that the mine was in fact housing many works of art in addition to tons of gold. They were able to confirm from the head cashier of the Reichsbank's Foreign Notes Department that the gold in Merkers mine was literally the entire reserve of the Reichsbank in Berlin.
That's a lot.
So this article gave like a solid play-by-play of the entire process of inventorying the gold to moving the gold and even using it as an evidence in war crimes proceedings, as it was found that a large quantity of the loot was actually taken from victims of the SS. So in total, everything recovered in Merkers mine was around $517 million, which would be roughly $8.5 billion today.
That is incredible. That is an incredible amount of money. It really is crazy because war now is way more expensive, even accounting for inflation. Like the average amount of gear and everything that goes into equipping an individual soldier is way more than what it used to be for cost, even adjusted. But still, you got to think about the cost of like a fighter plane or whatnot. They don't have thousands of these planes that are utilized for warfare now like they would have done back in the day. Now you have a couple dozen, and those are like the things that turn the tide of war in an area. This amount of money would have probably paid for around a dozen of those planes.
So one interesting thing, though, I just realized while you were talking is the countries that you're fighting, their gear makes it.
No one hates history, they just haven't found the right teacher yet. Or in this case, a nerdy best friend who loves to tell you all about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hi, I'm TK, the creator of For the Love of History podcast, a place for people who want to learn more but don't know where to start, and history lovers who want to break from the mainstream. From rat trials to warrior women, we cover topics from every country and era. Whether you're a history expert or just starting out, there's a place for you here in the Time Machine. So join me every Friday on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube for a brand new topic. See you there. Bye.
When Johann Rall received the letter on Christmas Day 1776, he put it away to read later. Maybe he thought it was a season's greeting and wanted to save it for the fireside. But what it actually was a warning, delivered to the Hessian colonel, letting him know that General George Washington was crossing the Delaware and would soon attack his forces. The next day, when Rall lost the Battle of Trenton and died from 2 colonial Boxing Day musket balls, the letter was found, unopened, in his vest pocket. As someone with 15,000 unread emails in his inbox, I feel like there's a lesson there. Oh well, this is The Constant, a history of getting things wrong. I'm Mark Chrysler. Every episode, we look at the bad ideas, mistakes, and accidents that misshaped our world. Find us at constantpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Makes the expense of your gear, essentially, because if you're fighting like a country with all like the most well-decked out soldiers, and then yours aren't, the war becomes more expensive for you because now you have to give your soldiers all of that gear.
Yeah,
so
technology.
Theoretically, if you have more money than your partner, you can do what I did, not partner, than your enemy. You can do what I do in Civ 6 and just buy all of the coolest shit, and then now they're fucked.
Guess what? That is almost the exact same thing of what ended up happening with like the Soviet Union. Remember the whole thing with the arms race?
Yeah.
So one of the big things that led to a lot of financial difficulty is that the Soviet Union every year had to increasingly spend a larger percentage of its GDP on military equipment, which was becoming more and more and more outdated. Like the closest point of parity between the US and the Soviet Union was probably in the 60s and 70s. But as things started to go into the late 70s, going into the early 80s, the difference in quality between American gear and Soviet gear was vastly different. We were simply able to outproduce them so much more. And so in upping our production even further in an arms race for whether it was submarines, planes, or everything else, as the Soviet Union tried to match that, they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the economy, they didn't have any of that. And so it became an even bigger strain, and eventually trying to keep up with the West is one of the things that would bankrupt them past, the horribly inefficient economic system that they had anyway.
That's so smart. Okay, guys, so instead of killing your enemies, bankrupt them. Follow for more war advice.
Follow for more war advice.
So ultimately, with the Nazi gold found in Merkers, they did their best to redistribute this money back to the places that it was stolen from. But when it came to the items that were taken from individual people, some of it was auctioned off to the public and others were sold, and the proceeds were given to organizations that basically offered to aid Jewish people. And that is just one instance of Nazi gold being found. There were many, many other locations where Nazi gold was recovered. However, even with these finds, there's still a lot of gold that is unaccounted for. And that is where the legend of Nazi gold extends into today. So with many people believing that there are still lost reserves to be uncovered around the world, where on earth is this gold? And are there stashes that we are able to find? Let's see. So one of the most well-known areas that Nazi gold is rumored to be hidden is Lake Toplitz. And I have to talk about it because everybody talks about it. It's one of the great mysteries. Okay, so this lake is located in Austria. It's about 40 miles southeast of Salzburg. And for about 5 months of the year, you really can't even get there because it's completely frozen over. And honestly, I've included a picture here. Steve, you'll have to scroll to the bottom and I'll upload it for you guys. I mean, it's beautiful. It is absolutely stunning. It is a lake surrounded by mountains, which is my dream location.
I mean, one of the happiest places you've ever been was when we were in Hallstatt and Salzburg. It's really beautiful there.
And this is where many, many, many people believe a large sum of Nazi gold was hidden at the end of World War II. So why do we think that? Well, witnesses in the area, they claim that at the end of the war, they saw Nazis dropping huge crates into the lake. Locals told stories of large truck convoys with heavily guarded SS troops going to that lake in early 1945. In addition, at the end of the war, nearby banks noticed locals trying to exchange large sums of British banknotes. And that was pretty odd because the banks questioned them, only to find out that the locals found these notes washed up on the shores of Lake Teplitz. It got even weirder, though, because when it turned out that these banknotes were high-quality forges that were actually created by the Nazis in the hopes to destabilize the entire British economy.
I love that story because there's so much stupid little economic spy warfare that was done during this time. So yeah, the Nazis tried to basically airdrop or utilize agents in Britain to spread terrible amounts of really high quality forgeries, as you just said.
That was their plan. They didn't actually do it.
Cause inflation. They wanted to.
Yeah.
That was one of the things.
So I guess when they didn't use it, they decided to just cart them off and drop them into the lake, which is really weird. That's a really weird thing to do. Why didn't they burn them or something?
It's a great question. Maybe because it could potentially be utilized here still, even if they couldn't enact the plan exactly at that moment.
Maybe. So why hasn't anyone found anything in Lake Teplitz? Because, I mean, people have been aware of it since 1945. And have they attempted it? Well, remember how earlier we discussed the Allies looking for Nazi gold? And they found some in Merker's mine? Well, after the war in 1947, a team of U.S. Navy divers were sent to the lake to do a search. But the conditions in this lake were so bad that they literally couldn't find anything. And ultimately, they had to actually abandon the search after one of the divers drowned.
Wait, how bad of conditions are we talking about here?
So let's get into that. Lake Teplitz, it is 2,500 feet above sea level and is located in a valley with mountain sides that are densely forested. You can see the picture below.
Oh yeah, I see it.
The only access to it is from a mile-long private dirt track. The lake is over 1 mile long and its width ranges from 500 to 1,300 feet depending on the location. The lake reaches depths of over 300 feet in some areas. It's a freshwater lake, but only for the upper 60 feet, as the water below that level is salty and it lacks oxygen.
Wait, okay, that is a way more complex thing than I thought for a lake.
Exactly. So the interesting thing about that specific layout is that anything that goes below that 60-foot depth, it doesn't decompose, which means that any debris that has ever fallen into Lake Teplitz over the years, it just stays there. And it has formed an almost impenetrable barrier, which makes diving in that lake extremely dangerous. So the U.S. Navy were not the only ones to attempt a search in the area. Over the years, there were many, many people who have actually lost their lives trying to find the gold. And many of the deaths have been really mysterious or unfortunate. So for instance, the first death that occurred in the area, it happened in 1946. 2 climbers were attempting to climb the mountain above the lake, and they were found in a snow hut on the mountain, with both having been murdered.
Murdered?
Yeah. It turns out that they had both previously worked at the naval testing station at the lake, but mysteriously murdered in a snow hut.
That is so suspicious.
Another one. So a Frenchman in 1950, he died at the lake where he was camping, and he left behind signs of digging. So while his death was actually being investigated at the same time, the police also found 2 bodies on the other side of the lake, and both had been shot in the head.
Okay, again, very suspicious.
It keeps going. So in 1959, though, a magazine called Der Stern, they funded a search of Lake Teplitz. So what they did is they got a team of divers out of the lake for roughly 5 weeks. And this team was successful at recovering 15 metal and wood boxes. And these were found to contain millions of pounds worth of forged British banknotes.
So they did actually find stuff in the lake.
Yeah, that's the thing. People were finding the bills washed up on shore. So I'm pretty sure they just dumped a bunch of stuff in there. So they found millions of pounds worth of forged British banknotes. They recovered documents belonging to the Nazis, and they also discovered the equipment that was actually used to make the forged notes. There are rumors that say that divers left behind other boxes that they saw as, the people in charge instructed them to leave them there. So the findings that were published by the magazine ended up leading to many, many more people coming to Lake Teplitz to actually attempt to find missing gold. However, this increased traffic led to more drownings in the lake, like a lot of drownings, because again, impenetrable barrier past 60 feet, you're going to drown if you're not, like professional Navy divers drown.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to go and actually search all this stuff. And people are going to if you have the potential to make potential millions, like people are going to risk it for the biscuit, so to speak. And in that case, that biscuit was salty and they drowned.
Yeah, so the increased traffic led to more drownings in that lake, and eventually authorities ended up banning all diving in Lake Teplitz in October of 1963.
I get it.
In 1983, a professor who was given permission to dive in the lake, he was originally intending to study the flora of that lake, but he found beyond the barrier of branches and debris a lake bed that was littered with parts of torpedoes, a seaplane, and prototype U-boats. He also said that there were large numbers of boxes, which he also left behind.
So it wasn't just this is almost, it sounds like a testing ground for basically stuff, an area where there could have been secret military research.
Which would explain the convoys. So years later, he returned and he took photographs of a box on the lake floor. This box showed Russian script, and this photo is what led to speculation that the missing amber room may have been located at the bottom of Lake Teplitz.
Oh, the amber room. I remember we talked about that before for treasures, for things like the
Missing
collection
room.
of Russian royal treasures that
still hasn't been found.
No,
I bet it's chilling in some rich person's basement, because you'll see later on in this episode, I'm pretty sure, that there was a secret society that held onto a diary of potential gold treasure map, basically. And then they gave it to them finally after all of the Nazis, because it was a bunch of Nazis were in a secret society and they were higher up.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they all died off, they gave the book to the government as a gift, as an apology. And I'm like, I feel like one of those higher ups relatives just has all of this treasure stashed somewhere, my precious. But again, that is totally my belief and not at all should be taken as fact. Thank you. We have no proof, though, that the amber room is located in Lake Teplitz, and it is literally just speculation. So don't go diving into this lake that you're not supposed to dive in, people. So there was also an expedition funded by CBS where they also funded a huge company called Oceaneering Technologies to explore Lake Teplitz. This expedition happened over the summers of 2000 to 2001. Ooh, I was 5. I was 4, and then I was 5. But yeah, and utilized a submersible. However, it's not clear what was recovered by these efforts. Officially, not much was discovered outside of forged banknotes and beer bottles.
Wow, that's such a treasure.
Right? Witnesses at the lake said that many large boxes were loaded into armored trucks, though. And this was done under police supervision. So do with that what you will. And then in 2005, a 3-year contract was signed that would allow Norman Scott, who was an American treasure hunter, to search for any potential treasure. His first course of action was to measure the lake, but at that point, many people were skeptical as to whether anything would even be left in the lake. It's been years.
And people have been searching many, many times, even using a submersible to go down.
So the deal that was struck allowed for anything that was potentially found by the American divers to be split between the Americans and the Austrian state. However, even though it is unclear what this expedition recovered, it doesn't seem as though anything major was found. So, is there treasure in Lake Teplitz? Well, even after multiple failed attempts at retrieving any gold of value, people still believe that there's treasure in there. This is due to some major discoveries that were made. So, stick with me here because it was super unclear and I really had to go digging. In 2001, a medal was found that was the personal seal of Ernst Kaltenbrunner, who was the SS member that was actively involved in concealing stolen treasure.
Oh.
So the second discovery, though, was from the professor's photos from earlier. So remember that one professor who was studying flora? Well, in 1985, he seemed to photograph what appeared to be the entrance of an underwater bunker. However, it was never explored. Then in the 90s, an above-ground bunker was discovered close to the lake, but this bunker's entrance was completely collapsed. And while there was a witness that said he helped soldiers load boxes through this bunker entrance, no one has ever tried to explore it, as far as my sources said.
Why? Even if it collapsed, you'd think that people would still like try to mine it out or something.
Probably dangerous. So ultimately, Lake Toplitz, as of right now, may just be a lake that at one point held treasure that is now long removed, or that is still actively holding on to the treasure that has somehow been missed for all of these years.
Wow.
So what about other sites? Well, the next location where people believe Nazi gold to be hidden is Poland. Yes.
Yeah, that would make sense.
The entire country of Poland. So the common belief is that when the Nazis were retreating, they had a train filled with gold, jewels, weapons, and art, and they took this train to the central Sudetes mountain range, which was on the border of Czechoslovakia and Poland, and they hid the train in a now collapsed or sealed tunnel in a mine. So there are stories that a German miner watched a group of soldiers wheel a train loaded with valuables into a tunnel, but they did not bring the train back out again. And so in 2015, people were pretty convinced that this missing Nazi gold train was found. So 2 treasure hunters, Piotr Koper and Andreas Richter, said that they had the deathbed confession of a German soldier that actually helped hide this gold train at the end of World War II. These treasure hunters used this confession to fuel their search, and they utilized ground-penetrating radar to scan the mountain for the train. And so in 2015, they actually found something.
Oh, they did?
So their radar images, they showed a heavily armored train that was equipped with gun turrets. So this led to many people swarming to the area in order to help look for this long-lost treasure. Unfortunately, though, after a week of searching, no train was found, and the treasure hunters had to admit that they had discovered, quote, no train and no tunnel, and not even railroad tracks were found in those mountains.
Wait. Then what did they find?
So it turns out that the image that they had initially detected, it happened to be a natural rock formation created by underground ice that just happened to look like a train.
No.
And it's crazy because even like the Polish minister was like, yes, I think we found it. So that must have been really disappointing.
Not only is that really disappointing, but okay, it sucks in that scenario because they're actively looking, they want something to be there. So I'm pretty sure it goes back to that whole thing where the brain is playing tricks on them and it's making them see things that is not there. But thousands of people swarmed it for that?
Well, a lot of people, you hear there's gold. What would you do?
Okay,
Hell, I'd be first in line. I'd be down. I'd be digging like a mole through those like mountains. Are you kidding me? I gotta pay my student loans.
It all comes back to student loans in the end.
And once I pay off my student loans, I'll give the rest to someone else. I just need to pay those viewers off so I can finish grad school. Anyway, that is my personal drama. My own personal drama.
Might be both.
Oh, God. Student loans are the bane of my existence. You know that one speech in Bridgerton where it's like, you're the bane of my existence and the object of all my desires? Well, like, my student loans are the bane of my existence, but my degree is the object of all of my desires. So anyway, is this Nazi gold train real? I don't know. It sounds logical that it could exist, but the complete lack of solid evidence is super confusing. Obviously, relying on hearsay has helped find treasure in the past, if the Merkers mine was any indication, but it's been decades with no real solid evidence of it. Maybe one day we'll find the gold train, and at that point, everyone who believes can say, I told you so. But I just don't see enough evidence to believe in it. However, many people out there are still holding out hope, and I'm not going to say it 100% doesn't exist, because we're still finding missing things. We're still finding missing things, and there's still a lot of missing things, because the Amber Room, where is it? It has to be somewhere.
Hey y'all, spooky season is here, and if you're looking for a show to whet your appetite for a little haunted history, then I'd like to invite you to check out Southern Gothic, a chart-topping history podcast that explores some of the most infamous legends, folklore, ghost stories, and hauntings of the American South. We've covered all sorts of stuff from the Bell Witch of Tennessee to the disappearance of the Confederate submarine, the H.L. Hunley. Not to mention our deep dives into the local lore of some of America's oldest and most haunted cities like New Orleans, Charleston, and St. Augustine. So, if you're ready for a little good old-fashioned Halloween storytelling with a commitment to quality historical research, then be sure to check out Southern Gothic today. It's available now on all your favorite podcast apps.
Right?
I guess. Oh, I'm going to look this up right now. I'm curious. I cannot remember if anything from the Amber Room was actually found. So, all right, hold on. Amber Room.
How good were their
found
inventories?
was this?
Because I'd imagine they'd have a good inventory of what was in it.
Oh, actually, wait. Hey. There's something. So the Amber Room has not been found. However, in October of 2020, Polish divers found the wreck of a German World War II ship, the SS Karlsruhe, which may contain parts of the Amber Room. The ship was carrying a heavy cargo when it sailed from Königsberg in 1945 and was attacked by Soviet aircraft off the coast of Poland.
Okay, but it's the may contain that's not really convincing me. Because there's always, it may be this like gold train, or it may be.
Oh, yeah, no. Damn it. Okay, yeah, literally you scroll down further in it and it just says divers found the wreck to be almost intact and discovered crates with unknown content, military vehicles, and porcelain, but then they later reported finding no traces of the Amber Room.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things that we just, you know? And yeah, those articles always do that. That's why I was like,
I hate that
no,
beginning.
you have to look at language. When I'm doing research, if it says may, possibly, like from the very beginning, they're baiting you. They're baiting you into reading the whole article. At the very end, it's going to be like, but actually, just kidding. It happens every time. I have a lot of experience. So anyway, we can't find the Lake Toplitz treasure and we can't find the gold train. So what else have we not found? Well, this Dutch village of Omeren was believed to have a buried treasure trove of Nazi valuables. In the summer of 1944, a bomb smashed into a bank vault in the Nazi-occupied city of Arnhem, and it scattered valuables everywhere. The Germans were said to collect these valuables and store them in ammo boxes. And as the Nazis were pushed back, they buried these boxes in the village of Omeren. At least that's the story that a German soldier told when they interviewed him after the war. And to add to this, the Dutch National Archives, back in January of 2023, ended up releasing a map that would supposedly lead to this treasure's location. So, the release of this map, it led to many people flocking to this area to attempt to be the first ones to strike it rich.
Oh, no.
And on May 1st, 2023, researchers and archaeologists, they decided that they would start an excavation utilizing a magnetometer and a mechanical digger. So they did this in the hopes that they would either find the treasure or they would show amateur treasure hunters that there's nothing to be found. Because imagine you're just living in your little town and then all of a sudden everyone shows up digging.
It's like one of those cases here. It's like one of the worst examples of tourism that you could possibly have. Like some people may want people to come there, to help stimulate local economy, but you're just going to have a whole bunch of treasure hunters that are going to be basically wrecking things around there in their search to find treasure.
Exactly. And if they believe they're doing it for a greater good, they'd probably be more destructive than they need to be. So the team searched the areas thoroughly. They dug, and in multiple places, the magnetometer indicated that there was something, and when they dug, they didn't find anything. But after 4 hours of searching, they ended up giving up. The hopes of the official search is that people would stop illegally searching for the treasure if they were able to show that, there was nothing there, which is what happened.
That's honestly the smart thing to do.
And honestly, guys, for something like this, I genuinely believe that it may have already been found. If anything was actually in that location, someone more than likely scooped it up and fled. So for this one, I don't think there's any treasure in Omeren necessarily at all, because it's not a major town. It's not a massive ground. It's a village. Like, I'm pretty sure the locals, more than likely, if anything, would have known.
Or someone would have been there shortly after the war if they survived to be able to take it and leave.
Exactly. So for the last possible location of Nazi gold, we head back to Poland, specifically to the location of Hochberg Palace. So this palace, along with 11 other sites, were listed in a diary that belonged to an SS officer that used the pseudonym Michaelis. It contained all of Heinrich Himmler's plans to hide all of the stolen valuables of Europe. And one of the locations listed was an abandoned well about 200 feet underground beneath the 16th century Hochberg Palace, which is located in Roztoka, Poland. So this gold that is allegedly buried here is worth billions of euros. and it was supposedly taken from the Reichsbank located in Breslau. So if you're thinking, okay, why are we just now hearing about this diary? Why did it release in
Is this the secret thing that you're talking about with the order?
Yeah. Well, apparently it was owned by a 1,000-year-old secret society who kept it hidden in the town of Quedlinburg, Germany. And this secret society also had a lot of high-ranking Nazi officers as members during the time. And so many of the descendants of Nazi officers were also members. So I'm sure they didn't just want to give it up.
Yeah, naturally.
In 2019, however, the society gifted the diary to a Polish foundation, and it was announced that they, quote, gifted the journal to the people of Poland as an apology for World War II.
In 2019.
Better late than never is what some people say. Not me, though. I hold a fucking grudge.
Here's the thing. Even if you want to account for it being the next generation or something, that is pretty damn far. Because
bunch of generations, actually.
I know, because you would I would have expected the same thing to happen in oh, wait, no, it wouldn't have. What am I talking about? That wouldn't have happened during that time because all of Eastern Germany and then Poland and everything were occupied by the Soviets.
Yeah.
So, and the majority of people that would have been the Germans would have tried to flee westward because no one wanted to surrender to the Soviets. No one did. Actually, Gab, that makes sense because especially for any of the Germans that were there, they would not want to give any possible thing to the Soviets or any kind of communist controlled forces, meaning up until the 90s, there's literally no chance that any of them would want to give up this information.
Valid. But I feel like they didn't have to be secret, They could have just been like, we got this book.
Hey, between what was going on here with the Cold War and everything else, you can guarantee that the Soviets would...
because Russia was
Russia.
Yeah, they were Sovieting. Valid. I don't know much about Russia today, but the Soviet Union scares the bejesus out of me.
As it did for many people for decades. Yeah, that's kind of the point.
So this diary, it included a map that showed the location of the well on the palace grounds, along with the supporting documents that showed that after the treasure was hidden, witnesses were murdered and the bodies were dumped in the well, and then explosives were detonated to seal the entrance. So is this diary legit? Well, experts say that it was written in the time period of World War II, but they aren't sure about the authenticity of who wrote it or its contents. As for searching the palace, well, it was supposed to be refurbished, and that project was going to allow for a thorough search of the well. But the last article that I can find on any search at this palace was published in 2020 with no follow-up. So who knows? Maybe they found something and they just kept it for themselves.
Yeah, this is also literally mid-pandemic when that is going on, which shut down basically every kind of major project you could imagine.
Yeah. As for whether I think there was treasure there, I do, but like many other sites that objects could have been hidden, it is believed that many caches were thought to have been looted by the invading Russian army as they marched to Germany. In addition, if the secret society had the diary for so long, who's to say that they didn't go get the gold themselves at some point? I don't know if that would be possible because the diary would have been 1940s. It could have happened before.
Mm-hmm. And remember, though, everything past that time was occupied by the Soviets, so even getting into there would have been hard in the first place. That's really questionable. I don't know, especially from the location.
It's so dicey because things happened so long ago. Anything could have happened to the alleged treasure in all of this time because, again, they were swapping back and forth like it was a hot potato. But sadly, we have no way to know the whereabouts of any of these now. We know that in Poland alone, more than 63,000 works of art and culturally valuable pieces are still missing that were stolen from Jewish people during World War II. In addition, the pieces that have been found may still be in museums in Poland and have not yet been returned. If you all want to read more about this, I read an article from 2020 where the New York Times spoke about the missing pieces and the possibility of return that they have. So it's linked if you want to go check that out. And that, folks, is all I have for you today. Do I think Nazi gold is out there? Yes. Do I think it's in the locations discussed? Maybe. As I said earlier, so much has happened between then and now. And since any gold that is found would have to be turned over to the government of the area in which it was found, I think people may have found them decades ago and just kept quiet about it, That's what I believe.
Yeah, and they would have used it to fuel stuff, maybe take pieces out slowly over time in order to do things. But they would have to be careful because you can't exactly take out works of art and then turn around and sell it, because it's not like gold that you can melt down, you know?
Yeah. That way they wouldn't have to return it and no one would question where they got it from, because so much was stolen we don't even know what's missing. Like theoretically they could have said, hey, this art piece is from my great-great-great-great-grandmother and we hid it. And so we're pulling it out now. Like literally, that's the thing. Because there are so many people died and so many crimes were committed and not a lot of records were kept. Anybody could pull out any artwork and be like, yeah, this is like old family heirloom that we hid.
Yeah.
During the whole ordeal. And who's going to question it? You're going to be like, you liar. No, you can't do that. It looks bad. So I'm pretty sure that's literally what probably happened. Because it was personal possessions, not like museum. Not everything was museum or gold. Like these were people's things. So they could just say, oh, this was actually just my thing.
Yeah. And also remember, even a bunch of the items, like they took jewelry. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, they took jewelry pieces and then kept them as jewelry pieces. I talked about the whole thing with melting them down. They would take silver, they would take gold, they would take all this, you melt it down and you consolidate them into ingots. And those are way easier to transport for things. Like as an example, during the Holocaust, like one of the big things that would happen during that time is that, you know, people, their caps in their teeth, they're made of gold. Like that was the big thing you'd have. So the Nazis, to the Jews and any other people that they were exterminating, would rip out their teeth. They would take out the teeth either before they died or after they would die. Most cases after they would die here, to, you know, harvest from the bodies the gold, and then you would take that gold and be able to repurpose it for other things.
I feel like nobody needs gold that bad.
The Nazis did. I mean, discussed literally in the beginning as to why they needed it, because oftentimes that's the only thing they could really trade with.
Yeah, hate to see it. But that, folks, is my episode. If you guys think you know any more locations of Nazi gold, please email us because I would love to hear about it. And don't go treasure hunting, guys. It's disrespectful. Unless you're treasure hunting in the middle of nowhere, I guess.
Gabby, you can't just say, hey, if you know any locations of Nazi gold, email me, when you spent the entire episode talking about how you would totally get it just to pay your student loans.
I'm talking about speculated locations of Nazi gold because I hit the main ones that I could find, but I know there's a lot of other sites. There was so many.
Yeah.
But I don't want a 5-hour episode. I could just do a part 2, you know?
That's true.
I'm not going treasure hunting.
You just did a bunch of side eyes while also saying that, like, I'm not doing this.
These student loans are crushing, y'all. I'm sure everybody listening to this from the US is in the same fucking boat. So, like, it's not our fault. I mean, it is. We went to college, like, idiots. Who does that? Should have gone to the military or learned a trade. AC, HVAC. I could make good money with an HVAC. Or electrician. I'd be so good. You could say I would be electrifying.
It's weird seeing this from the outside perspective with the terrible puns.
What do you mean?
Usually that's my job.
But what do you think I'd make a good electrician?
Yes, I do. But I also think that you do the same thing that you do in your science classes where you would use completely wrong terminology. Not even wrong, but just like it's technically correct. Like remember the whole plants eat sunlight thing? I think that you would describe all of the specific components in ways that would really make people think that you don't know what you're talking about when you actually do.
I just realized because I have like that OCD where I just cannot remember if I did something. I will wire something and then never sleep because I'd be like, oh, did I plug it in right? Oh, did I connect that to the right thing? Did I ground it? And then I'd never actually sleep. I just think I'd burn someone's house down. So, and then you can't just go back in and be like, hey, I just want to double check that outlet. It'd be weird.
It'd be weird.
Anyway, bye guys. Love you.
See you all.